following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with Dan Rylance, and we're very pleased to, on this edition, be interviewing two more candidates for the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education. We'll be talking to Kelli Saginak in this particular segment, and then in the next segment, Matthew Wiedenhoeft will be here. Want to just start out by quickly mentioning that recently, most people, I think, received a map in the water bills from the city. And we don't have to zoom in on this or anything, but it just kind of, it looks like this, and it shows where the polling places are, because polling places have changed for many, many people. The map the black and white map that was sent out in the water bills, I think is pretty easy to figure out, but there were some colored maps that somehow people in the community got. They were much harder to figure out where your polling place was. So if you happen to be questioning where you're supposed to go to vote, give the city clerk's office a call and find out exactly, just give them your address, find out exactly where you go to vote. And remember, the election, the general election is on Tuesday, April 3rd. It's a big election, a lot of things on the agenda, and voter ID is, it seems to be changing all the time, but when you go to the polls, you might want to have your ID with you just in case something changes between now and then. So anyway, with that out of the way, I'd like to welcome Kelli to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Why don't we just start out by finding a little bit about you and why you're running for school board.
I came to Oshkosh in 1997 from a pretty long background in education. And I've coordinated the school counseling program since '04 with UW Oshkosh. And so I'm very connected to the community in terms of training school counselors, being out in the schools, and I'm also a parent of children in the school system. And colleagues of the Oshkosh district, they approached me and said, have you thought about it? Have you thought about doing this? And I had thought about it for quite some time, but never really put that into action. The timing didn't seem right. And however, after talking to other colleagues and friends of mine in the district, it seemed like this year was a good time.
Yeah. Colleagues on the school board, you mean, or?
In the district office
Okay.
and around the community.
Okay. Anyone on the school board that, sort of said, come on, Kelli, do this?
Oh, John Limburger,
All right.
I would have to say. He's been very supportive
Okay.
and encouraging.
Okay, great. Well, there's a lot of stuff, that we want to talk about. Now, the school board recently considered a redefined school week for teachers, and I have to kind of read this because this just happened last night as we tape this. And so they considered a redefined school week for teachers that would, I think they were hoping would create a more flexible week for them, while at the same time increasing expectations for collaboration, professional development, and face time with students outside of the normal workday. That did not come to fruition, but I know, according to the newspaper this morning, they are looking at kind of going back to the drawing board on that, and they do hope to bring something forward in May to the school board. So, you know, obviously, if you're elected, you would be on the school board when this is reconsidered. Do you see something wrong with the current workday schedule for teachers? And if so, what do you see wrong with it?
No, I don't see anything wrong with it. If anything, teachers put in an enormous amount of hours that I think the local community and probably the nation don't even know about. They're there before the children come, and they're there a short time after the children leave. They get very little time to do anything around planning, preparation, grading, new programming, new initiatives. That's all done on their own time. After school, evenings, weekends. Being an educator myself, I know what that life is like. Yeah. And you just do it because you love it and you're passionate about it. And so I would have to say I don't see anything wrong with the work week, but I'd be more interested to hear if the teachers see anything wrong or whatever their needs might be in terms of their productivity.
Well, in fact, the local teachers union has said, you know, we want to know what's wrong with the current work week as it is.
It's been that way for years, forever, that I'm aware of.
Yeah. So okay, good.
UWO has experienced a huge amount of physical pain. Why would you want to jump into a second physical pain? I mean, both of them are hurting. You know, salary increases, your budgets are being cut. You experience that every day at UWO. Yes. Why do you want to go experience it, you know, for the next couple of years on the school board?
Well, I guess I'm used to it, for one thing.
Okay.
It's something I'm used to. It's something I'm used to talking about. I have children in the school system. Okay. I have a lot of friends, colleagues, counselors, administrators, and teachers, and that I feel passionate that if I can be useful in some way, that I want to do that. And we're optimistic that things will move forward. Will it ever go back to the way it was, whatever that was? I don't know, but we're optimistic that we can move forward in the best interest of the young people and the youth.
Okay. What experience do you have on big budgets?
Big budgets. My biggest budget that I ever managed, and I did that on my own, was when I was a prevention specialist in Florida. I managed a $250,000 budget all by myself. So that's about the extent that I've had for me personally. Yeah. But I was on the budget and planning committee for the College of Education, and then I worked around budgets, but as far as being a real savvy fiscal person, I'd like to leave that to somebody else.
Yeah, but it's really going to be your job.
Part of, but not alone. I won't be alone in that.
But you know, 2 or 3 years ago, we would interview candidates for the school board, and the issue about budgets and the importance of finance was not as important because each of the last couple of years you cut. If you're elected, you're going to have to cut $2 or $3 million next year, $2 or $3 million a year. What are you going to cut if you're on the school board next time?
I won't cut anything. I'll do it collaboratively with the board, and I don't know what that's going to look like. However, I do feel strongly that there's the human consequence of the decisions that are made are thought about.
They are. You're at the point now where you're unbowing. The fat's gone. So, you know, are you going to not pay teachers anymore next year like they decided this year? Are you going to increase the number of classes that each teach or the number of students in it? I mean, where are you at on this?
I don't know where I'm at in terms of, I think it has to be collaborative, it has to come from the voices of the constituents, the stakeholders, and it has to be done collaboratively. I feel very strongly about that. I don't have a strong opinion on where to cut. I think there has to be needs assessments done, data gathered, and it has to be a thoughtful process with a lot of input from the community and the district.
There's not usually a lot of time to do needs assessment and stuff like that. I mean, that's a great thought, but you know, if you're elected, you would take office probably sometime in late April. I think the district I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, don't they start looking at this in like September and October, sort of? So, there's not a lot of time,
No, nothing formal in terms of that kind of stuff, but we'd have to see where the board has left off and how we're moving forward with that. And again, it's a collaborative effort.
Of course, everybody has even though you have to vote in a majority way to do this, everybody has their own ideas in looking at the budget on, something that could possibly be sacrificed in lieu of something else. Do you have any kind of thoughts about?
I only know what we've gone through at UWO. We haven't had a raise in 5 years.
How about raising new sources of money? Any thoughts on how you might bring in new sources of revenues that is badly needed for the next 2 or 3 years?
There may be ways to do more partnerships with businesses within the community, more partnering. There may be the availability of more grants that could be written and looked at.
Okay, good. Well, one of the huge things that you're going to be charged with is, finding a new superintendent.
Right.
In a couple of things with regard to that, Dr. Vigut submitted his resignation 18 months after he was on the job, and just after his contract had been renewed for another 2 years. And, it was recently kind of brought to my attention that I don't think he ever actually relocated to Oshkosh. I think he still maintained his out-of-town and or current residence in another community, another county. So, 2 questions. If you are elected, would you be in favor of or supportive of putting some kind of a clause in a new contract, not just for the superintendent, but for any, top administrators in the central office, that says if you leave mid-term, it doesn't have to be right in the middle of it, but any time during the term of your contract, there's a certain penalty of some sort, whatever that might be, that they would have to, subscribe to and agree to. And also, when the city manager was hired, they put a clause in his contract that said within a certain period of time you have to relocate to the city.
Right.
Would you support something like that for a school superintendent?
I would. I think to have an administrator that's not part of the community and not settling into the community and being a part of the community, I think that impacts morale. And I think it keeps people wondering, are they staying? Are they really going to be a part of this community? So I would be in favor of giving them some time to relocate their families if that's what if they have that to bring with them, and there being some type of a contracted situation in terms of either who helps bring in the new superintendent, or some type of an accountability plan that lets the people of Oshkosh and the district say, okay, they're going to be here a while.
And what about, or maybe you were answering that altogether, what about some kind of a clause that says, there's a penalty if you do leave during the contract period?
Yeah, I think I'd want to hear more about that, what the penalty would actually be. But I'd be in favor of definitely having discussion around that.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Great.
We live in a society where test scores rule. 10 years ago, the big contest was, how are they doing? We have No Child Left Behind, which raised the standard. Right. Now we're moving towards holding teachers accountable for the performance of their students. A law passed by this current legislature that says that the performance of their students shall be part of their salary. What do you think of that?
I think teachers definitely need to be held accountable to high, rigorous 21st century standards of education. However, we aren't building cars in the classroom. Okay. Children come with a wealth of issues, a wealth of learning styles, differences, backgrounds, developmental issues, and I think those variables are so out of our control that we have to be careful in terms of penalizing teachers if they can't have everybody get high test scores or everybody get A in their classes. So I'm leery about that piece. However, I do agree with holding teachers to high, either state or national standards and evaluating them accordingly.
But the law does say that part of your adjustment of salaries in the future, if you're on the school board, is the achievement scores of their students. You have to deal with that. That's in the law. So, I mean, you can say you don't want to, but you got to. Another thing now, we've gone even beyond teachers. Now they want to investigate people like you who teach future teachers. And I'm wondering if you're familiar with the suit of the National Council versus the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin system. What's the lawsuit and what's the issue?
Well, I don't actually teach teachers.
Okay.
I'm in the professional counseling program,
Okay,
so
I'm sorry.
I don't really
Okay.
teach the undergrads.
But you're familiar with the suit?
But I'm familiar with a group that's wanting open records to all of what higher education professionals do in terms of educating teachers. I am aware of it.
Okay. Your syllabi would be available on the web and other places already, aren't they?
Pretty much.
Yeah, so I don't know why they want the syllabi of I don't quite understand why that's not something they can't get a hold of right now.
I don't either, because of our course management system is online.
Yeah,
They can get things. I think I've Googled my own name and found my stuff online. So
Yeah. Anyway, this is a suit, and it's suit against the Regents of the University of
Right.
Wisconsin system. It's a state issue, so I just wanted to get it.
Okay.
Yep, I am aware of it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Seems to me, and this is a tough question, I'm just going to ask. Seems to me that there are 3 seats open, and I'm conceding that I think the 2 incumbents have a very good chance of winning. And that leaves you and Jared Erdman for the 3rd seat. He's a business person, and you, if elected, would be the 3rd faculty member from UWO on the school board. That's 3 out of 7. How would you respond that this is really an imbalance, and that the school board really ought to reflect a broader representation of other people that live in the community?
It's an interesting question, and yet I have reflected on it in anticipation that you might ask it. Well, I know John is in the College of Education and actually involved in teaching teachers. I'm more involved at the graduate level in terms of pupil services, and then Mr. Lowenstein is more undergrad, college, different college, totally.
Letters of Science, yes.
And so in that respect, I think we bring, we happen to work for the university, but we bring a diverse perspective and expertise and vision. First and foremost, I'm coming as a parent to run on the school board, not as a University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh faculty. I'm most concerned with the education of my children and the district for my children and my neighbors' children. I suppose it could be an issue. I don't think the 3 of us see it as an issue because we come with such different visions and perspectives and gifts, and yet I
Okay. Thanks
could see that.
just want to follow up on that
That's an
just
honest
for one.
answer, I think.
The other issue, you mentioned the word collaboration early, and Cheryl kind of seems to me the rap on the school board is that academics never come to a decision. They're always collaborating. They're always studying, but they never come to, there's no strategic plan the last
Right.
2 years.
Right, absolutely.
Longer than that.
Longer than
It's
that,
been
yeah.
longer. It's
yeah.
been since
So,
maybe
at
06.
some point you got to make
been a
a
long time.
decision. And
Right.
it seems to me academics like to talk and redo and study, and they don't make final decisions.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I struggle with that in my own college. I often feel like I'm an outlier because it is difficult for me to go on and on and on. And there do need to be decisions made. I absolutely agree with you. I think one of the issues that has stymied strategic planning over the years is just the turnover in terms of superintendents, in terms of the board. There's been a lot of changes there and a lot of changes at the district office and superintendent. So I think that has gotten in the way of strategic planning, as well as I do agree there needs to be some decisions just made. I don't do real well with going on and on and on. So,
But we don't want you to.
That's a relief. That's a relief.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
and I think the people that know me would
Okay,
would say that.
Well, a few things. I want to go back to the superintendent because I'm wondering what sort of qualifications and skill sets you would like to see in a superintendent.
Oh, I'm
that
really
comes
glad
here.
you asked that. We need a visionary person. We need a contemporary person, an innovative person that's really anchored in 21st century education in terms of real world sustainability, building a district that gives students relevant, real world, rigorous experience. I feel very passionate about that. We need a superintendent that's motivating, inspiring, great communication skills, approachable, and visible in the district. It'd be nice if the youth of our community would know the superintendent on a very, not a personal, not a first name basis, but a comfortable basis, and there was a lot more of that type of leadership.
Okay. Well, and certainly, a lot of those things were said about Dr. Vigut, that he was a visionary, and, I think he wrote a book on something or other, and yet he's left,
Right.
or he's going to be leaving, and,
Right.
Visions don't exclude leaving.
yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that being said, I mean, again, I think that goes back to putting some kind of a clause in a contract that says, if you leave, there's a penalty of some sort to pay, because he was so many of those things, if not all of them. You mentioned leadership, and I know John is a colleague and so forth. He is the current president of the school board. Do you think that he is a strong leader, that he's a good leader?
Wow, that is really a tough question to just kind of put out there. I think he has the potential to be a good leader. I wouldn't mind if he was a little more influential, a little more out there in terms of his voice, and I would tell him that if he was sitting here. I'd like to see him step up a little bit more in terms of leadership and put his voice out there and what he really stands for.
Well, yeah, and I mean, he just sort of lets some members of the public sort of walk all over him, The school board has rules that they're supposed to be following at school board meetings. He lets certain members of the public just disregard those rules, and it's actually been left up to the superintendent to have to jump in at times to say this discussion is out of order, and that should really be John's decision and his responsibility, and he hasn't done that. And I think that that's part of, not all, but certainly part of why this board is what a lot of people say is dysfunctional.
But I think that the passion and the sincerity is there to turn that around, and I feel optimistic about that happening. I do. I feel strongly in the last few meetings that I've been, and I've sat and I've listened to John and I've listened to the board. I hear how much they want to move forward and how optimistic they are and how they want to have deeper, harder, more difficult discussions, even if it's, off time. And so I truly believe the energy is there.
Sure. Well, and one of the ways that they're trying to correct this dysfunction is they're going to be sort of self-evaluating themselves. They've approved that process, if you will. How would you, well, first of all, are you in favor of that? I mean, you're nodding your head, so I'm assuming that you like that.
Self-evaluation, absolutely.
Yes, for the
I think
board.
I have to keep tabs on myself. I have to keep myself in check. And I need feedback because often if I don't get it, I begin to do this. And I can really become skewed in my vision and I can lose my perspective. And so I do agree on self-evaluation, self-reflection.
What do you think about the timing of when they're going to do it? I mean, they're planning on doing it, I think, in April, aren't
Right
they?
after the reorganization.
And so, that's kind of a weird time because here you'll be a new member and you certainly can't evaluate yourself at that point because you haven't done anything on the board at that point.
I think I could. I think I could give myself at least some baseline. Where am I starting? Where am I beginning? What do I need to grow from where I'm at now, and set some goals for myself, and then reevaluate those. So I think as a new board coming together, whatever that looks like, I think that is a good time.
Okay. And obviously, as a parent, you've been following the school board meetings and so forth, so you could evaluate, you know, your colleagues on the board.
Right.
Okay, good.
How would you handle criticism as a board member from, say, the Oshkosh Northwestern? And the reason I ask that is because it seems that John in particular, John Lemberger, and maybe some of the others, are really thin-skinned about handling public criticism. They don't go down to the Northwestern, they don't write letters, but they use the school board meeting to take shots at the Northwestern. So let's say they, you do something they think is not correct, which they have a right to do. How would you handle that? What would you do?
I wouldn't take shots on air
Okay.
at the meetings. I think there's a different type of forum for that. I truly believe that a lot of the difficulties could be alleviated with building relationships.
Okay.
And I would want to build a relationship with the Northwestern so that they get to know me more, know what I'm about more, and so possibly they might not take things I say out of context and write them up in such a way that could be harmful, that could be hurtful in the paper. I think the district needs to get the Northwestern on their side instead of this continual kind of rub or friction that seems to be going on.
Particularly with the April 3rd vote on Oaklawn.
Right, right.
It's very important that
I think there needs to be much more relationship there.
Yeah.
And, you know, whatever happens with Oaklawn, you know, I think that this district still needs to have the boundaries redrawn. You know, that too, since you've been around for a while here, that has been talked about for probably 10 years, if not longer.
We always ask everybody that.
Yeah. So whatever happens with Oaklawn, do you feel that we still need to kind of redraw the boundaries?
I think they need to be looked at. I do. I worry about how much more we can put on West High School because the west side continues to grow. And I worry about the decreasing enrollment in North and them losing FTE. And when they lose FTE, they lose programs. And that's such a beautiful facility. There's a lot to offer on the North side. And I think that needs to be looked at closely in terms of equity and access and equality. And so I would like to look at the boundaries.
Okay, all right. And, you know, so many people tend to look at this district and think in terms of boundaries as, you know, using the river as kind of their guideline. I think that's probably a huge mistake, too. I can see where it sort of happens, you know, but do you think that the river should be used as a starting point or not? Because I don't know that would solve the problem.
I don't know if it would. Because I'm not from here originally, and so when I did come here, I quickly learned that there's quite a historical and traditional divide between Oshkosh, the east and the west. That sort of divide, and I feel it. When I lived on the east side at first, and then when I moved to the west side, it was like, what are you moving over there for? Well, I just happened to find a house that was ready to move into. I don't have the history, and yet I still feel that history, and I think sometimes that's a detriment to the district moving forward, and so that does worry me. And I forgot your question.
No, that was actually it. You answered it. But we're almost out of time. Can you just look into camera 3 and in about 20 seconds tell folks why they should vote for you on April 3rd?
All right. I would like you to vote for me on April 3rd because first and foremost, I'm a parent. And I believe in this district, I believe in this community, and I'd like to be a part of 21st century change.
Okay, great. And you're concise. You did that very well.
Yeah, or she's used to that.
Thank you very much for being here. Just sit tight for 1 second. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will be joined by Matthew Wiedenhoeft. We'll be right back. Thank you very much.
the U.S. Department of the Treasury receives about 1.4 million reports of problems with paper checks. Checks can be lost, stolen, or delayed. If you still receive Social Security payments by paper check, Treasury wants you to know about a safer, more convenient way to get your money: the Direct Express Prepaid Debit MasterCard. The Direct Express card is new and is available to anyone receiving Social Security benefits, even if you don't have a bank account. Your monthly benefits will be automatically placed onto your card account each month on the day your money is due. While other debit cards cost money, it is possible to use the Direct Express card for free to make purchases, pay bills, and get cash at thousands of locations nationwide. There are no sign-up or monthly account fees. No more waiting for the mail or worrying about lost or stolen checks. Call 1-877-212-9991 or visit www.usdirectexpress.com.
And welcome back to the second half. We are very pleased to be joined now by current school board member, and he is seeking re-election, Matthew Wiedenhoeft. So welcome. We
Welcome,
appreciate
Matt.
your being here. Lots of questions for you. Hopefully we'll have time to get to a lot of them, if not all of them. But like when you ran the first time, we always start out by asking folks to tell us a little bit about themselves, and in your case, why you're seeking re-election.
Okay. My name is Matt Wiedenhoeft, and I have been on the board for 3 years. I have a daughter in the district. My wife and I currently send our daughter to Oakwood Elementary, and in fact,
You got Oaklawn on the brain, don't
Yeah,
you?
Yeah, it's easy.
Oakwood, okay.
we were there last night, in fact. So, but yes, and my reasons for running is that
For re-election, yeah.
basically, I think that having started a few things, I would like to see some of those finished. Obviously, certain things that were accomplished are in need of doing again, such as obviously searching for a superintendent. But when I first ran, I was looking for several things. I wanted to get the district involved in a redistricting plan to help with one of the items that we had when we came here, which is that people couldn't tell us where our daughter was going to go to school when we were looking for a home, and we did encounter some people who said, we actually moved to Appleton or Neenah instead for those reasons. So I'm hoping that this referendum and some redistricting of boundaries will take care of that.
So no matter what happens with Oaklawn on April 3rd, you're in favor then of doing some redrawing of the boundaries?
I think it's going to be necessary, yes. I think that we would be better served actually by doing what some other districts in the state do, which is redrawing their boundaries every 5 years. If you have a child going through school, you may see a redistricting, once every, or once or twice within that time, and obviously any plan of that nature, you wouldn't split up families. If you had children of a certain family going to one school, you're not going to suddenly redistrict and send a portion of them to a different school or on a different track. You would want to make sure that the feeder schools still go to the same. For instance, if you're redistricting and you're looking at a border between schools, you wouldn't want to suddenly shift someone so that they would be suddenly headed to west instead of north, for instance. But I think that redistricting on a regular basis is healthy, is good for the district.
Just to follow up on that. Plan B, which will go into effect if the Oaklawn thing
Yes,
doesn't go through. I sensed in watching you on the board that you weren't totally comfortable with Plan B. Is that correct reading, or am I wrong?
Well, there were, we were basically down to two plans at the end, and I was correct. I was in favor of another plan, which would have moved the older students rather than the younger.
In other words, the high school level.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I
Basically,
thought.
at the high school level, what we would have done is, and I know this would have been unpopular, but I had some good reasons, which I'll be happy to state here. I wanted to basically consolidate and create a 10-11 school, or excuse me, a 9-10 school and a 11-12 school. So instead of having two high schools that go 9-12, you would have one that goes 9-10 and another goes 11-12. And the benefit of that, other than the redistricting and the movement of older kids who are being bused or driving themselves anyway. That is to say, if you are redistricting the grade schools, those kids, for the most part, are probably trying to walk to school or take a bus to school. You know, they're local. They're closer to their elementary school. If you're redistricting kids who are in high school, well, very few of them live next to the high school at that point. Most of them are coming in from areas of the city that are farther away. So that was obviously, something that I thought was beneficial. But as I began to say initially, in addition to that, what I found appealing was the idea that we could have classes run that might not otherwise run. Instead of having a 10th grade that was, 500 kids, suddenly you'd have a 10th grade that was twice that size. And so classes that might not run because there were only 10 kids who signed up for it suddenly might have the 20 kids necessary in order to get the class to run. So suddenly you're offering electives that you couldn't offer. Suddenly you're allowing more students more choices in what they want to see as electives. And the idea that we could actually produce higher level courses for advanced placement. Things of that nature all could run probably a lot easier if we had the schools combined in grades rather than having two separate high schools.
I'm having a memory thing. Didn't Mr. McDermott, were you on the board when he was on there?
I was on the board at the end of his term. Obviously, he was on the board.
I remember that this came from West Point. Not West Point, West Bend, that there is a model down there of what you were...
There's more than one. In fact, Neenah did this as well. They no longer have it.
Okay.
And someone pointed out that to me and said, well, Neenah, if this was so great, why didn't Neenah keep it?
Okay.
And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry, Cheryl.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You mentioned about the search for a new superintendent. He's leaving, and he submitted his resignation 18 months after he's been on the job, just after you guys renewed his contract for 2 years. Two questions with regard to the new superintendent. Would you, A, support putting a clause in the contract that says that if you leave during the contract period, there's some kind of a penalty, whatever that might be, there's some kind of a penalty. And B, it has been brought to our attention that to our understanding, Dr. Wiedenhoeft has never actually relocated to Oshkosh. He still maintains his home in another community, another county, and so forth. So would you secondarily support putting as a term of their contract a clause that says, within X period of time, you must relocate to Oshkosh?
Sure. And I guess I can't fault him for not necessarily owning a home right away. When I myself moved to the district, I rented for a year actually prior to purchasing a home. And one of the key factors actually in our case of wanting to purchase a home fairly quickly was to ensure where our daughter would go to school and so that she wouldn't be changing from one school to another constantly. But I can certainly understand the idea that someone moving to a new location might want to rent for a year in order to determine where they would want to live. So I guess if I was going to have a clause like that, I would want to make sure that the time frame was fairly lengthy, a 2-year time frame to find a home or something to that effect.
How long would a contract be for, though?
Contract would be for 2 years generally.
Okay, so Then there's no point in putting a clause in the
Yeah,
contract.
the city
so-
put a year on Mark Roloff when he was hired as city manager. That's where we kind of got that idea.
Okay.
That's all. Just
Yeah.
And you know, I guess I am in favor of people who work for the district living within the district. Certainly, I think that's something that should probably be true of not only of most municipalities, school districts, and other things. Is that the idea that you would be a part of the community that you're serving?
Well, I think it shows a certain committedness, you know, in this case. My personal opinion is he didn't seem to be very committed to the area. He was searching for another job and he left or will be leaving. So, you know, that's just my own personal opinion. But as you do search for a new superintendent, what are the skill sets and the qualifications that you're looking for? You know?
We were asked almost the identical question by the Northwestern, and I gave somewhat of a quip answer, I suppose, in that I listed a name of a person.
Oh, okay.
So I guess.
did you-
I mean,
What's
as
your
a
name?
potential superintendent, I mean?
No,
Oh.
I said the question is what qualities would
Oh,
you
I see.
like, and I said all the qualities that I see in David Gunlock. So
Who is?
he's the deputy
Deputy
superintendent currently.
superintendent.
So
And apparently not interested in the
no,
position.
he
so-
has stated flat out he's not interested in the position.
think that's a good answer.
He likes the position that he has, and he feels it's an excellent fit for him, and it is. I absolutely see no problem with him as deputy superintendent, and he runs a sort of a dual role. He also is in charge of technology, which is something he's very interested in, very keen on. And although I debate certain things with him about technology, I don't see a better man for the job. But I guess what do I see in him? I see someone who is fairly forward-thinking, someone who is level-headed, someone who commands respect from others and respects others, and someone who can get the job done when tasked with it.
Okay. All right, good.
This is a way out question, kind of like maybe your answer, Dave. I'm trying to move a little bit into what First Amendment rights students have in a school system.
Wow.
And so I want to play with a hypothetical.
Okay.
You're on the board. This happens starting in May. High school students at both West and North start wearing T-shirts that say "Recall Walker," and then students start wearing T-shirts that say "Keep Walker." The principals at both schools have decided, and no, there's no eruption. They just wear them. Sends them all home.
And this is a hypothetical again.
Sends them all home. Says change your clothes. Goes to the superintendent. Parents are mad. Superintendent supports his principals, and it comes to the board. What would you tell the parents?
You know, I personally don't see that they shouldn't. I mean, certainly there are problems with clothing that have occurred. Obviously, items have already that we have in our own. I shouldn't say probably that we do have actually in our own rules regarding gang colors or things of that.
But
nature.
not a political T-shirt.
But I see no problem with students being able to express themselves in that way. Obviously, if they're running around with giant banners and doing things that are disruptive, you know, that's not what we're there. That's not what they're there for. They're not there in school to be disruptive. And so, I would probably draw the line at them handing out leaflets or doing anything of that nature, or using school time to promote one or the other. But as far as what they're wearing, yeah, I don't see a problem with somebody wearing a T-shirt that says "Re-elect Walker" or "Recall Walker." It's their choice, and provided their parents don't mind. Now, if their parents mind, then hopefully their parents are going to stop them at the door.
Right. Yeah. All right. The hypothetical deserves a more rational answer, and the answer is that the courts generally upheld, and the key word is there was no demonstration or anything, that basically they have a right to wear it as long as there is no disruption in the school system. That's what the courts upheld over.
And yet, gang colors are not necessarily disruptive on a daily basis, and they're not allowed to wear.
Yeah, well,
certain
that'd be another
clothing.
test, wouldn't it?
So, well, it's been tested. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure.
Okay.
In California, it went fairly high, I
Okay.
believe.
And how was it ruled? They can't wear them?
Yeah, they can't wear
Yeah,
them. They're
okay.
not allowed.
Because I can see where gang colors could be disruptive.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
Are you
yeah.
kidding? Yeah, it's caused them
So-
no end of trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question on student rights. You know, students come and they ask questions when you guys run every 2 years about, you know, and stuff. What would you think of working out, if it could be worked out, to have an advisory member from West or North High School rotate and be an advisory member on the school board?
The person would be advisory. That would be okay. Obviously,
It'd have to be advisory.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't, they're
No,
not
no, but they
elected,
could-
and
if they were
they're
18, I
Right,
guess they
they're
could run.
well, I suppose.
Yeah.
But as a minor and
Yeah.
as someone who was not elected, obviously they couldn't have a vote.
Right.
But we actually we brought that up, I believe, about 2 years ago. And I'm not sure whatever happened to it, other than maybe other things
Okay.
were more pressing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was offered up as a suggestion that we have either someone from North or West on the board who was a student. And I'd be open to that. I don't see any problem with that.
Okay, good. Well, speaking of the board, you know, you've been on there now. You're completing your third year. Do you feel that there is strong leadership on the board coming from your from your school board president?
Well, what exactly? It's regarding leadership. Did you have something in mind?
Sure, I'll give you a couple examples. Number one, he does not, you know, make certain citizens adhere to the rules that you guys have in place. It is a business meeting, and he does not stop certain individuals from, you know, rambling on, really in an attacking mode. The superintendent has had to call certain things out of order where that should be the responsibility of the school board president. That's one example. Another example, he brought forth a policy that he recommended and then ended up not even voting for his own recommendation. You know, I mean, he could see that he was probably going to be outnumbered, but still, I mean, if you believe strongly in something, then have the courage of your convictions and stand behind what you brought forward. Otherwise, leave it at home. Put it out with the trash.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to answer the last part first. With
And those are
regards,
just two examples.
because I actually did the same thing about 2 meetings ago, where you know, I was pretty well convinced that if we didn't move from 5 to 6 class periods this year, we were going to be doing it next year. And so I was doing my best to try and convince others of the same thing. And when it came down to the vote, it was very clear that it was going to be a 6-1 vote. And so I made it a 7-0 vote. Did it mean that I was not strong in my conviction? Well, no. To me, it was more a sign that we either stand together or we fall together. And if everyone is going to vote for this, if I vote against it, you know, then I'm sure I can stand there and say, well, you know, I didn't vote for that. It's not my fault. If I vote with them, then I'm in the same boat they are, and we've all got to come out of that together. We've all got to figure out, okay, we're not going to do this, then what are we going to do? Sort of like actually getting a 7-0 vote for a new superintendent. It's an important sign, I think, to the community that we stand together as a board.
Well, but you
in
can
terms
work
of-
together. You don't have to agree on every single thing.
No,
But
no.
once the vote's taken, you can be mature and say, okay, you know, I was on the losing end of that vote, but
Sure.
you know what? The majority has ruled. That's the democratic society that we live in, and you guys have my congratulations and my support. You don't have to, you know, just go along with everybody else just because they're in the majority.
No, and as I said, I did my best to try and
Yeah.
convince them otherwise before the vote.
Okay.
But
So the other point, though.
the other point regarding strong leadership on the board, Mr. Lemberger's leadership style is certainly different than those of past board presidents, and I think when he is convinced that something needs to be corrected, he will take someone to task, with regard to individuals playing out of turn, it's possible that he could act faster, but at the same time, not sitting in that seat, I could certainly see myself, missing something or not acting as fast as I should have. I certainly know there are plenty of times when I'm on my way home and I think, oh, wait, I should have said this, or I should have done something differently. So,
Okay.
Well, to go on with that a little,
Yeah.
you were sort of what, the assistant president of the board or deputy president of the board? Or?
I'm the vice president of the school
Okay,
board
all
currently.
right. Would you be up
Before
for-
that, I was the secretary.
Would you be up for school board president if you win?
I suppose I would consider it. It's not something that I necessarily am seeking actively.
Okay. But if you were nominated and won, you would obviously accept it.
I suppose, yeah.
Would you be supportive of Lemberger as continuing in his position as president?
If he wished to do so, and there were no others, generally, since I've been on the board, we have changed it every year. So I'm assuming it will change again next year anyway.
They may be looking at you.
Possibility, I suppose, but we'll see.
All right. In a March 4th column, Jim Fitzhenry from the Oshkosh Northwestern wrote, "The public's perception is based on what the board and administrators have communicated loud and clear for a long time, inconsistency and indecision." What would your response be to that?
Everyone has a right to their opinion, and certainly that is his. I don't believe that we've been inconsistent for the most part since I've been on the board. I can think of certainly some items where inconsistency reared its head and we proceeded anyway. For instance, closing Lincoln School. I was I voted against closing Lincoln School at the time, but once it was closed, there were board members who had voted to close the school who then were voting to keep it. Once it's closed and it's derelict, why are we holding on to this?
Yeah.
And it was the only piece of property actually that we had that had a value to it, which could be sustained because the university obviously was looking for it. Are we inconsistent? No, actually, I think, well, at least within the last year, I think we've proceeded on a fairly smooth course. We are looking at a referendum for a new Oaklawn. We are obviously searching for a new superintendent, which is sort of a fallback position, but that's not really a change of course so much as a hiccup in the road, something that came along that we're just going to have to deal with and proceed. People are referring to things like, well, what happened to the plan? You were supposed to have a long-range, strategic plan, and we're proceeding with that. I don't see that we're going to finish that plan. In fact, now that we're looking for a new superintendent, I want to extend that a little longer so that the new superintendent that we hire can weigh in and give their 2 cents worth as to what that plan should entail. I don't think that on a day-to-day basis we have been wandering back and forth. We have been exploring our options over the course of the summer with regard to Oaklawn before we made a decision, and if we had not done so, I think that then he probably could have held us up for having jumped to conclusions. We had to review what other sites were possibilities. We had to review what other possibilities there were other than a new Oaklawn. So in that regard, I can't agree.
Okay, but I don't think it's just about the Oaklawn thing. I do think that this school board and previous school boards, really, in all honesty, have been pretty indecisive about a lot of things. And the strategic plan, they have let that languish for a long time. Not just, again, you guys, but previous boards.
That I think we're going to get solved.
I hope so.
We've got...
And redistricting, that too has been rearing its ugly head for the last probably 10 years or so. you know, I forget what the issue was. Was it the Riff Road issue or something else where every other school board meeting it seemed like there was a new plan being brought forth, and it was all because different neighborhood groups of parents would continue to come to the school board meetings, and it was basically a not in my backyard or not with my kids' school issue. And so it just seems like the school boards historically have not been able to make a decision and stick to it. They keep pussyfooting around and are constantly being influenced, it seems, by different groups.
Yeah, I'm sure we're influenced by groups, yeah.
So,
absolutely.
you know, I think that's, you know, where some of the indecisiveness has, you know, been used as a critical tool against the boards. I mean, would you concede that that's at least fair?
Yes, unfortunately there was a point that you made earlier, which I'm trying to get back to, and now I can't think of what it was. I wanted to address something that you had said earlier about indecisiveness and in the former boards.
Well, redistricting, long-range plan, the not in my backyard thing was the other one.
With
that
the
I brought up?
redistricting, again, one way or another, I see that that's finally going to happen. I will say that since I've been on the board, most of what one would expect to be accomplishing as a board member was put aside, and it was all about money. For the past 3 years, I mean, the moment I got on the board, we had to cut, as I recall, it was $5 million from the budget, and then we had to come back and cut more because it still wasn't enough.
And you may have to do that again.
3.4 and then 1.2, or something like that, which made up 5. But
You want to ask your question about cuts?
But basically, having done that year, and having not raised to the levy limit, which is something that I voted to do at least one year because we were going to end up with double-digit increases. Those are things that we've had to deal with, and they've been the most important. They've been the highest priority. And for those reasons, you're right. Other things have not been done. Also, I guess in that regard, the stability of a superintendent, I think, would help greatly. When Betty Lang was here, she was, you know, an excellent superintendent. However, she was just trying to keep the boat steady. She wasn't rowing in any given direction. And I felt that we were, you know, beginning to head somewhere. And obviously now we're going to be starting over again in July 1.
We're almost out of time.
Wow.
So
If you're reelected, you're going to have to cut again next year.
We are.
And the year after. We need new sources of revenue. Can you briefly address either what are you going to cut next?
Well, as I said in the meeting I attended 2 or 3 meetings ago, I do feel that we will probably be reconsidering the move from 5 class periods to 6 next year. I don't see any other way around it.
Which was thrown out for teachers not receiving a pay increase for next year, right? In part.
The one for the other, correct.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, we can't continue to do that anymore either because places like Neenah are running rampant over us. So it's hard for us to compete for new teachers when their salary is far above ours. For new hires, they can cream, you know, the crop, and it's hard for us to then retain them. By that same token, sorry, am I over the time?
just about. Why don't you take 20 seconds and just look into camera 3 and tell folks why they should vote for you?
Okay. Well, I am hoping that you will turn out to vote, and I'm hoping that you will turn out to vote for the referendum. I feel it is worthwhile, and I'm hoping that you will vote for me in that I could continue to accomplish some of the items that I set forth to do, such as redistricting, and I hope to actually help to balance our future budgets and our take care of our deferred maintenance.
Okay, great. Just sit tight there. And again, polling places for many, many people have changed with redrawing of boundaries and so forth in districts. Not the school district, but other districts. So if you are at all in doubt, or maybe just as a general good measure, you should call the clerk's office here in the city or in your local township and find out exactly where you do go to vote on Tuesday, April 3rd. So that's going to do it. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thanks to
Thanks.
Kelli Saginak for her first appearance here in the first segment. And we will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got All Right on Oshkosh.